The fire cracked under the weight of the night, its sparks rising into the wide desert sky like frantic fireflies desperate to escape. The air smelled of sagebrush and smoke, heavy with the scent of roasted corn drifting from the distant cook fires. Children huddled near their mothers, and the drummers struck a slow, steady rhythm that carried through the canyon like the heartbeat of something larger than any single soul gathered there. 12-year-old Elira sat cross-legged on a buffalo hide, her small frame caught between the towering shadow of her father and the vast emptiness left in her chest since her mother's passing. Chief Tenawa's presence was like stone, immovable, cold, unyielding. His voice, when it finally cut through the drumbeat, was sharp as obsidian. "Elira," he said, his words carrying far beyond the circle. "Tonight you will choose. One of these women will become your new mother." The announcement dropped heavy on her shoulders, and though she had known this night was coming, dread crawled through her veins like winter's chill. She pulled her shawl tighter around her arms, eyes lifting toward the 5 women who stood in a crescent before her. The first woman, Avela, was young, her skin like smooth river stone and her smile as bright as a summer dawn. She wore turquoise beads in her braids, each strand swinging with calculated grace. The second, Luma, carried herself with elegance, her features soft as petals, her voice already praised among the tribe for its gentleness. The third, Saya, was skilled in weaving, her fingers forever busy, and her beauty carried the practical charm of someone who knew her worth. The fourth, Nira, laughed easily, her presence like honey poured across bread sweet golden, irresistible. And then there was the fifth, Mara. She stood slightly apart, as if the other's beauty had pushed her to the edge of the circle. Her hair was black and coarse, unadorned by beads or feathers. Her skin bore the weather of wind and sun, and her eyes, dark, deep, and unflinching, met no one's gaze. Across her face, from temple to jaw, ran a scar jagged as lightning. It was neither hidden nor explained. It simply was. The tribe stirred restlessly, the whispers rising like restless insects. Everyone thought the choice obvious. Why would the chief's only daughter choose shame when beauty, kindness, and grace stood within reach? To select Mara would be to spit against the river of tradition, to invite ridicule from children who would laugh behind their hands, from elders who would shake their heads and mutter. But Elira's gaze clung to Mara as if bound by invisible thread. The drums pounded. The fire hissed. And within Elira's chest, her heart beat not with fear, but with something stranger, older, something that tugged at her bones. She remembered her mother's face, round, kind, glowing with laughter, and how quickly it had vanished when the raid had come. The memory was like a wound she carried still. 4 winters had not softened the edges of that night. These women, these painted smiles, they did not remind her of her mother. They were beautiful, yes. They were kind, yes. But they were not marked. They were untouched. Mara, with her scar, had the look of someone who had been through fire and lived to walk out the other side. Elira's lips trembled as she pulled in a breath, her gaze lifting to her father's face. Chief Tenawa's expression was unreadable, a mask of carved wood. But his eyes flicked briefly toward Mara, and in that moment, Elira saw something she had never seen before in her father's hesitation. He too thought the choice foolish, but the pull inside her chest was relentless. Elira's small hand lifted, trembling. The circle seemed to shrink, the flames closing in, the eyes of the tribe boring holes into her skin. She pointed not to the flawless, smiling women who leaned forward eagerly, ready to embrace her, ready to bask in the honor of being chosen. Her finger leveled at Mara. Gasps echoed around the fire like sudden thunder. Mothers clutched their children. Warriors stiffened. Even the drummers faltered, the rhythm collapsing into silence. Mara did not move. She did not smile, did not weep, did not protest. Her scar caught the light, and for a fleeting instant, It looked like a river of fire across her cheek. Elira's voice, thin but steady, broke the silence. "I choose her." The words fell into the circle with the weight of stones into deep water, ripples spreading outward, shaking every soul that heard them. The tribe was stunned into stillness, the fire crackling louder in the absence of voices. Chief Tenawa's jaw tightened, but he did not correct her. Not yet, not here. The other women lowered their eyes, some with bitterness, some with pity, their shoulders heavy with rejection, but Elira did not falter. She stared at Mara, scar and all, with a certainty far larger than her years. In that moment, the night itself seemed to lean closer, eager to see what would come next. The moment Elira's trembling hand pointed toward Mara, the circle around the fire rippled like a struck drum. Gasps turned into whispers, whispers into sharp-edged laughter, and soon the night itself seemed to mock her choice. She chose the scarred one. An old woman hissed, clutching her shawl closer. "Of all the five, she points to shame," muttered a young warrior, his arms folded across his chest. "Chief's daughter must be blind," another said under his breath, though not softly enough to escape Elira's ears. The drums had fallen silent, leaving only the popping of the firewood. It sounded harsh now, too loud, like bones snapping in the flames. Elira's cheeks burned, but she refused to lower her gaze. She stared at Mara as though her very life depended on it. Mara, however, stood motionless. She neither thanked Elira nor denied the choice. Her scar glowed orange in the firelight, making her appear carved from flame itself. To Elira, she looked unshakable, even while the rest of the tribe shifted and murmured. Chief Tenawa's jaw worked as though he were grinding stone between his teeth. He rose slowly, his tall frame towering over his daughter, muscles cut in firelight and long black hair brushing his shoulders. His turquoise and bone necklace gleamed with authority. His deep voice carried like thunder. "Elira has chosen," he declared, silencing some of the mutters. "Her choice is law. Mara will take her place as mother." A stunned stillness swept the circle. Some looked relieved the chief would not shame his daughter openly. Others shook their heads, unable to believe he would allow such a thing. Avela, Luma, Saya, and Nira lowered their eyes, disappointment heavy on their faces. Each of them had prepared for this night, perhaps even dreamed of it. But Elira's small finger had crushed those hopes like dry reeds. As the crowd began to disperse, the whispers did not fade, they grew. "She will bring ruin. Scars bring curses. What kind of mother is that for a child?" Elira clung tighter to her shawl, her ears burning from their words. Still, she refused to regret her choice. Something inside her had spoken louder than fear, louder than the tribe's judgment. When the circle thinned and the stars stretched across the black sky, Mara finally moved. She stepped toward Elira with slow, deliberate strides, her moccasins silent in the dirt. She crouched to meet the girl's eyes, her face close enough that Elira could see the tiny stitches that must have once closed the wound on her cheek. "Why me?" Mara's voice was low, rough, like river stones dragged by current. Elira swallowed hard. She wanted to say so many things, that the other women were too perfect, too untouchable, that their smiles felt hollow while Mara's silence felt real. That scars, though ugly, meant survival. But all she managed was, "Because you've lived." "I see it in your face," Mara blinked. For a moment, her expression softened, and Elira thought she might even smile. But no smile came. Instead, Mara gave a small nod, as though she had been given a burden and would now carry it. Behind them, Chief Tenawa loomed. He placed a heavy hand on Elira's shoulder. "You have chosen, child. But do not mistake this for an easy path. The tribe will not forget. And neither will I." His words were not cruel, but they were edged with warning, as if he doubted both his daughter and the woman she had chosen. Elira looked up at him, her small chin trembling but her eyes unyielding. "I do not care what they say. She is mine now." The chief's eyes narrowed, then flicked to Mara. He said nothing more. Turning away into the shadows of the camp, the fire dwindled, leaving the night colder, harsher. Elira and Mara stood together in the fading glow. Around them, voices still drifted like biting insects in the dark. Yet between the child and the scarred woman, a strange silence grew, not empty, not fearful, but something solid. For the first time since her mother's death, Elira felt like she had chosen, not been forced, not been left behind, but chosen. And that made the whispers of judgment sound less like truth and more like the hollow cries of those too afraid to see beyond the surface. In the hush of the desert night, Elira clutched Mara's hand. It was rough, scarred like her face, but strong. Strong enough to hold her through storms. Strong enough to remind her that scars did not mean weakness, they meant survival. The lodge smelled of cedar smoke and hide, the fire at its center snapping softly as the night deepened. Shadows of the woven walls shifted like restless spirits. Elira sat cross-legged near the flames, her knees pulled to her chest, the weight of the evening still pressing on her small frame. Her choice hung in the air like an unanswered prayer. Across from her, Mara settled onto a fur mat. Her movements were quiet, deliberate, and she carried no trace of the false smiles the other women had worn. In the glow of the fire, the scar running from her temple to her jaw stood out like a mark branded by fate. Elira could not look away from it. Mara's voice, when it came, was low and rough, as though it had traveled through storms. "Why did you choose me, child?" she asked again, though her tone was softer than it had been by the fire earlier. Elira hesitated, her fingers tightening around the edge of her shawl. She was afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of sounding childish. But she lifted her chin and whispered, "Because scars mean you lived. The others, they are pretty, but I could not see their lives. Yours I can see." The scarred woman studied her for a long moment, her dark eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, she reached into a small leather pouch tied at her waist. From it she drew a strip of cloth embroidered with tiny horse tracks stitched in red thread. She turned it over in her calloused fingers, then passed it across the fire to Elira. "This," Mara said, "was once part of a child's shirt. A child I pulled from a wagon when flames surrounded it." She lifted her hand and traced the jagged line of her scar. "The fire kissed me here. It wanted to take me, but I did not let go of the boy. I carried him out. My face burned. My life changed. But the boy lived." Elira's breath caught, the cloth trembling in her hands. She imagined the smoke, the heat, the scream of wood cracking under fire. She imagined Mara's skin burning, her teeth gritted, refusing to drop the child. "Did it hurt?" Elira asked, her voice barely above the crackle of the flames. Mara gave a short laugh, more bitter than light. "It hurt worse than anything I can name. For weeks I could not bear to touch my own skin." Children pointed, women looked away, men muttered that I was cursed. But pain fades, Elira. Pain always fades. What stays is what you saved. The words lingered in the lodge like smoke, settling deep into Elira's chest. She looked down at the embroidered cloth, running her thumb over the stitched tracks. It felt heavier than any jewel, more precious than turquoise or silver. Mara leaned back. Her face caught half in shadow, half in firelight. "Do you understand what you've done tonight?" she asked quietly. "By choosing me, you chose the harder path. People will laugh at you. They will whisper about me. They will tell you that beauty is what matters. But you look deeper." Elira swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "I don't care what they say. You are strong, and I want a mother who is strong." For the first time, Mara's expression softened, her scar pulling awkwardly at the corner of her mouth as if it struggled to remember how to smile. But it was a smile, small and fleeting, and it reached her eyes. "Then I will teach you what strength means," Mara said. "Not the kind the warriors shout about, not the kind measured in who can ride the farthest or strike the hardest. The kind that carries pain without breaking. The kind that protects even when no one is watching." Elira shifted closer to the fire, drawn not just by the warmth of the flames, but by the warmth in Mara's words. For so long since her mother's death, she had felt alone, drifting in a world too large and too cruel. Tonight, for the first time, she felt a hand reaching across that emptiness. She looked at Mara, her small voice steady. "Then teach me." Outside, the night wind whispered across the desert, rattling the hides of the lodge. Inside, the fire burned steady, as if sealing a pact between the scarred woman and the chief's daughter. Neither of them knew what storms awaited or how cruel the tribe's judgment would become. But in that moment, under the hush of smoke and flame, something unbreakable had begun. The days after Elira's choice stretched long and heavy, as though the sun itself disapproved and scorched the earth harder for it. The tribe did not forget. They whispered at the well, sneered at the cook fires, and muttered curses as Mara passed. Children laughed behind their hands, some bold enough to point, mocking both the scar and the girl who had chosen it. Elira felt their stares like thorns in her skin, but she refused to lower her head. She walked beside Mara with her chin tilted high, her dark eyes steady. Still, at night, when the lodge grew quiet and the fire dwindled to embers, she clutched her shawl close and wished her mother were there to tell her she was not alone. One morning, as the dawn bled red over the horizon, Elira carried 2 clay buckets down to the creek. The water was low this season, trickling sluggishly over smooth stones, but she liked the walk. It gave her time to breathe. Mara followed, her steps silent, her scar catching flashes of sunlight through the cottonwoods. They were filling the buckets when a boy's voice rang out from behind them. "Look there!" He jeered. "The chief's daughter walking with a cursed woman." Elira stiffened. She recognized the voice. Tolan, son of one of the warriors. He was older, nearly a man, tall and broad for his age. Other children trailed behind him, eager for mischief. "Why'd you pick the ugly one, Elira?" Tolan smirked, his friends snickering. "Couldn't tell the difference between beauty and a beast? Maybe scars are catching. Careful, she might give you one too." The laughter that followed stung worse than a whip. Elira's cheeks burned. Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out, sharp and fierce. "She's more than you'll ever be." Tolan's smile faltered. "What did you say?" Before she could back away, her anger surged. She lifted one of the buckets and flung the water straight at his boots. Mud splashed up his leggings, dark stains spreading as the children behind him shrieked with laughter, this time at him. Tolan's face twisted with rage. He lunged, his hand shooting forward to shove her. But before his fingers could graze her shoulder, Mara moved. She was faster than Elira thought possible. Her hand shot out, gripping Tolan's wrist like iron. The boy froze, shock flashing in his eyes. Mara's scar caught the sunlight, fierce and unflinching, making her look carved from fire and stone. "Enough," she said, her voice low but commanding. Tolan tried to pull away, but Mara's grip held. The mocking laughter of the other children faded into uneasy silence. Her eyes burned into his, steady as a hawk. "Do not raise your hand to a child. Do not mock what you cannot understand." For a heartbeat, the air itself seemed to tremble. Then Mara released him. Tolan stumbled back, his pride wounded deeper than his wrist. He spat in the dirt but said nothing more, retreating with his friends, their footsteps kicking up dust as they vanished into the trees. Elira's heart pounded. She looked up at Mara, chest heaving. "You stopped him," she whispered. Mara knelt, her hand resting gently on Elira's shoulder. "I will always stop them." "But you—" She tipped Elira's chin up. You must keep your fire. Do not let them burn it out with their words." Tears stung Elira's eyes, but she blinked them back, pressing her lips into a thin line. "I would choose you 1,000 times again," she said fiercely. Mara's expression softened, the scar tugging awkwardly as her mouth curved into the smallest of smiles. "Then you are braver than most grown men I've known." When they returned to the village, whispers followed them as always. But this time, Elira walked taller. She carried her empty bucket like it was a shield, and Mara walked beside her like a fortress. That night, as the fire crackled inside the lodge, Elira leaned against Mara's side. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt safe. Not safe because people approved, but safe because someone would fight for her. Someone scarred, yes, but stronger because of it. And as she drifted to sleep, the thought settled deep in her heart. She had not chosen shame. She had chosen strength. Summer had turned the desert into a brittle landscape of cracked earth and sun-bleached grass. The herds grew thin, and the riverbeds shriveled under the relentless sun. Tensions rose among the tribe as survival became a daily struggle. Even Chief Tenawa, usually calm as stone, walked the camp with a furrowed brow, his eyes scanning the horizon for threats. Elira rose before dawn one morning, the air already hot and heavy with dust. She carried 2 clay buckets, water sloshing with each step as she trudged toward the creek. Mara followed close behind, her long black hair catching the rising sun, her scar gleaming faintly in the golden light. She carried nothing but her presence, a shield, a warning, and a promise of protection. The village had barely begun to stir when a distant smell reached them. Smoke. Thin at first, it thickened with every step, curling upward like angry fingers toward the blue sky. Mara froze. Elira stopped mid-step, the water sloshing dangerously close to the edges of the buckets. "Fire," Mara said, her voice tight and steady. She dropped the buckets and turned toward the sound, eyes scanning the horizon. Flames licked the dry brush beyond the grazing fields, already devouring the tall grass with furious speed. The fire moved faster than the wind, snapping and crackling, spitting sparks into the air. Chief Tenawa's warriors rushed past, armed with lances and determination, ready to drive off the rival band suspected of setting the blaze. But Elira's gaze drifted beyond them to a cluster of small, terrified figures near the edge of the fire. Children, trapped, too young to run, too scared to scream. Without a thought, Elira bolted. Her small legs carried her toward the danger, her heart pounding as fear and resolve battled inside her chest. Mara was immediately at her side, shouting, "Elira, wait!" Smoke rolled over them in waves, thick and acrid, stinging their eyes and lungs. The children cried, their voices nearly drowned by the roar of the flames. Mara dropped to a crouch, grabbing the nearest child, pulling them out of the searing heat. Sparks clung to her shawl, smoldering briefly before she swatted them away with her bare hands. Elira reached the edge of the fire, coughing and blinded by smoke, but she saw 2 more children frozen in terror. Mara followed, positioning herself like a living shield, guiding the children safely back toward the riverbed. One boy stumbled, catching fire on his sleeve. Mara yanked him back, her scarred cheek brushing against the scorching fabric, her eyes blazing with intensity. "Hold on to me," she commanded, her voice a lifeline through the chaos. The flames hissed and roared, but Mara's strength and precision were unmatched. One by one, she and Elira shepherded the children through the inferno, the sweat on their skin mixing with soot, their lungs burning with smoke. When the last child was safely beyond the reach of the flames, Mara collapsed briefly to her knees, exhausted but unyielding. Elira ran to her side, gripping her mother figure's arm. You saved them all," she whispered, her voice trembling with awe. Mara gave a harsh laugh, rasping through smoke and exertion. "No," she corrected gently, sweat running into her eyes. We saved them. And now they will remember that courage is stronger than fear. The tribe, watching from a safe distance, fell silent. Whispers of doubt and judgment had vanished, replaced by awe. Even Chief Tenawa, standing with his arms crossed, could not hide the flicker of pride in his eyes. Elira leaned against Mara that night. Soot streaked across her face and arms, but her spirit alight. I chose right, she murmured. Mara's fingers brushed the girl's hair back from her forehead. Yes, child. You always choose right. Courage? Courage is not always about fighting with swords. Sometimes it's about holding fast when everything burns around you. The fire crackled in the distance, the last embers of destruction fading into the night. But inside the lodge, a new fire burned brighter than any blaze outside, a fire of trust, of bond, and of respect. Elira finally understood this scarred woman, feared and judged, was not only her choice but the anchor in a world that had been nothing but chaos since her mother's passing. And Mara, with every scar, every mark, every story etched on her body, was proof that the strongest hearts are forged in fire. When the last sparks of the blaze were extinguished, the village fell into an uneasy silence. Ash coated the ground, drifting lazily in the warm breeze. Mothers clutched their children, their eyes wide with gratitude and fear. Warriors, still tense from the threat of the fire and rival band, stared at Mara as though she were no longer a woman but a force of nature. Elira ran to Mara, clutching her arm, mud and soot smudging both of their clothes. You saved them. All of them, she whispered, voice trembling. Mara's chest heaved, sweat and soot streaking her face, but she straightened, her scar glinting faintly in the last rays of the sun. We saved them, she corrected gently, glancing over at the gathered tribe. But you little fire, your courage guided us. The crowd had gathered slowly, their whispers fading into astonished murmurs. For the first time, they were not questioning the choice of a scarred woman, they were witnessing it. Mara had not only survived fire herself, she had carried the lives of the youngest and most vulnerable across it. Her scar was no longer a mark of shame, it was proof. Proof that strength could rise from pain and that survival could be more beautiful than perfection. Chief Tenawa stepped forward, his towering figure casting a long shadow in the ember-streaked dirt. He had remained mostly silent during the chaos, observing, calculating, measuring his daughter and Mara alike. Now his eyes locked on Mara's, and the weight in his gaze was heavy with acknowledgment. You saved my daughter, he said, his voice low but reverberating across the gathered tribe. You saved her and the children. I doubted you. I judged you. Tonight I honor you. Mara did not bow, nor did she speak in reply. Instead, she lifted her hand, the scar across her cheek catching the light of the settling sun, a jagged line of story and survival. The tribe fell silent, some lowering their eyes, others stepping back as though the scar alone demanded respect. Elira's small fingers found Mara's, gripping tightly. I told you, she said softly. I knew you were strong. Mara's eyes softened. Strength does not come from beauty, child. Strength comes from choices, from courage, from protecting those who cannot protect themselves. She looked around at the tribe. A scar is not a mark of weakness. It is a crown forged from the fires of life. The murmurs of disbelief that had followed them for days now shifted into whispers of awe. Mothers nodded, fathers bowed their heads slightly, and even children dared to glance at Mara with newfound respect. The other 4 women who had once waited for Elira's favor now stepped back, their previous grace and beauty overshadowed by the raw truth of courage before them. Chief Tenawa finally spoke again, lifting Mara's hand before the tribe. This woman is no shame. She is strength, and she will be the mother of my daughter as chosen by her heart. The air seemed to hum with approval, the the firelight dancing across faces filled with both pride and awe. Elira's chest swelled. She had chosen not what was easy, but what was real. As night fell, the lodge glowed with a different warmth. The fire's flicker was gentle, welcoming. Mara sat near the center, surrounded by children who had once watched her with fear, now leaning in to hear her stories. Elira rested against her side, soot still streaked across her face, hair damp from the day's exertions. "Do you see now, child?" Mara asked, brushing a strand of hair from Elira's forehead. "This scar, it is no shame. It is proof. Proof that even the hardest paths can lead to life, to honor, to love." Elira nodded, eyes wide with understanding. "I see it now, and I will never forget." Outside, the desert stretched wide, a canvas of stars and silence. Inside, a new fire burned, one not of flame but of bond, trust, and unyielding respect. The scar, once feared and judged, had become a crown. The girl who had chosen it felt a pride that no whisper of the tribe could shake. And for the first time since her mother's death, Elira knew that strength, courage, and love could be found in the most unexpected forms. Mara's hand rested lightly on Elira's shoulder, her eyes steady and proud. Together they had endured fire, judgment, and fear. Together they had proven that scars were not flaws, they were crowns forged in the trials of life. The first light of dawn stretched over the village like a promise. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and smoke from the night's fire, but it also carried a new sense of calm, a fragile peace that had not existed before. Mara stood at the edge of the lodge, her scar catching the sun's first rays like molten gold. She was no longer simply a scarred woman in the eyes of the tribe. She was a protector, a teacher, a mother by choice and by courage. Elira ran to her side, her small hands gripping Mara's arm. "The children are calling for you," she said, excitement bright in her soot-streaked face. Her dark eyes sparkled with pride. "They want to hear the story of the fire again." Mara smiled faintly, the scar tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Then we shall tell it," she replied, her voice firm but gentle. She looked over the village, taking in the tribe that had once whispered doubt, the women who had once stood in silent competition, and the children whose lives she had saved. All of them now regarded her differently. Chief Tenawa stepped forward, his muscular frame outlined against the rising sun. His long black hair fell over his broad shoulders, and the bone and turquoise jewelry around his neck glinted in the morning light. The villagers fell silent, sensing the weight of his presence. "This woman," he said, voice deep and commanding, "has proven her worth beyond any doubt. She is strong, brave, and wise. She is the mother my daughter has chosen, and by that choice, she is honored." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd, but this time they were filled with respect, not judgment. Mothers nodded at Mara, fathers lowered their heads in acknowledgement, and even the children who had once mocked the scar now watched in quiet admiration. Elira squeezed Mara's arm. "You are my mother," she said simply, the words carrying the certainty of a bond forged in fire and trials. "And I am proud of it." Mara knelt down so her face was level with Elira's. "And I am proud of you," she said softly. "You chose with your heart, and you stood firm against those who would judge without understanding. That makes you stronger than any warrior." The other four women, Avila, Luma, Saya, and Nira, stepped forward, heads bowed. One by one, they approached Mara and offered their hands in acknowledgement, a silent recognition of courage and choice. Mara accepted their gestures with quiet dignity, the scar no longer a symbol of shame, but a mark of respect and survival. Chief Tenawa watched the exchange, a rare smile softening his usually stern features. "Strength," he said to the tribe, "comes in many forms. Today you have witnessed it." His eyes fell on Mara. "You are not just strong. You are family, Elira leaned against Mara as the village slowly returned to its daily rhythm. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe, truly seen. The whispers that had followed her, that had haunted her since her mother's death, were gone, replaced by admiration and acceptance. Mara rose and extended her hand to the children who had once feared her. They ran to her, laughing and asking questions, eager to hear the stories of courage and survival. She smiled, teaching them, guiding them, and for every scar she bore. She shared a lesson of resilience. Elira watched her, awe and love mingling in her chest. She knew that the bond they had forged was unbreakable, that Mara's strength would guide her through every hardship yet to come. And she understood, finally, that scars were not flaws, they were proof of life endured, of battles faced, and of love that could survive even the fiercest fires. Chief Tenawa remained nearby, his watchful gaze protective but approving. The tribe had learned a lesson that would not soon be forgotten. Courage and heart outweigh beauty and perfection, and those who endure their trials emerge stronger, deserving respect and even admiration. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the village, Mara took Elira's hand and led her into the heart of the lodge. Together, mother and daughter, scarred and brave, entered a new day, one filled not with fear or judgment, but with love, honor, and the quiet, unshakable strength of survival. And for Elira, there was no greater comfort than that the woman with the scar was hers, chosen with the heart, accepted by the tribe, and revered by all who had witnessed her courage. The scar, once a mark of judgment, was now a crown, and Mara had earned it forever, the mother of Elira, and a living testament that true strength shines brighter than any beauty.